Hi, and welcome to this edition of In the Now, where we focus on uncovering the myths and misunderstandings of marketing and leadership with some of the world's most interesting people. And my guest today is Eric Cruz. Eric is the founder and CEO of Cruz & Company. Eric, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Dave. So glad you had me on.
So, Eric, just to get started, I'd like you to smash the myth, and we've talked about this quite a bit, that you can be successful in an organization just by running a great business operationally, and just doing a great job with operational excellence. How do you feel about that?
Well, Dave, it's funny you asked that question. First, thanks for having me, Dave. It's awesome. I've known you for a long time. A very successful business person, and I really appreciate the opportunity to be here. So thank you. So this is a big topic for us as a consulting company. We're a consulting company. We focus on, generally, we're starting companies that are we're starting with them generally when they're under their $45, $50 million size. So we work with companies that are, $1, $2 million up to $50 million. Then we try and get them from that size to a larger size. So we're all about growing businesses and helping them do whatever we can to help them grow. So to do as a consulting company, we focus on four buckets. We focus on operations, we focus on people, we focus on strategy, and we focus on finance. So we're very specific about what we focus on. And so this myth in particular is an important one for us because we hold ourselves accountable internally. We measure the growth of our companies, every quarter. And like you said, we work with about 100 companies internationally. And so we built an operating system to help companies with operations and get them aligned. And we use objectives and key results for that. And we can get them aligned and get them all organized. We can get them rowing in the same direction. We can get all the right people in the right seats and all these nice cliches that consultants use that are really valuable cliches too. And it's a big part of our business. That whole operational side is probably 50% to 60% of what we do. So it's not that I undervalue those things. In fact, I put a premium on those things. So I want to make sure that's clear. Running a well-run operational company is crucial. But we added in strategy and finance into our mix because ultimately what we've been discovering is that companies, you really fall into two categories. What we call commodity type companies that are usually competing on price or speed or quality. But there's really no differentiator other than that. Maybe their service is a little better, but they're commodity companies. We actually own a commodity company. We own a commercial painting company. I have a partner in that business. It's a separate, actual, real business that we own, in addition to a consulting company. And it's a commodity business. We're really good at what we do, but there's nothing sexy about us. So there's a commodity type of business that a lot of companies fall into. And then there's what we just call a more differentiated or a more unique business that has more of a play in the market. We call it a play. So what's this company's play? So what I've noticed in working with entrepreneurs for a long time is that there's this theory that if I run a really well-run business, I'm just going to keep growing. And what we learned is it's just not the case. So you can grow organically. You can do all those things by running a great business. And you can even grow pretty large by running a great business. But these companies that people look up to and idolize and talk about when they talk about great companies, generally speaking, like I'll just pick a few: your Starbucks, your Microsoft, your Apple, your Tesla, your Disney. Disney's in the news today. Whoever it is you're looking at, generally speaking, they're usually well run, not always, but what they have is they have a strategy that they're going into the market with. They figured out where are we playing. So we love a book called Playing to Win. It's a fantastic book for strategy. It's what Deloitte's based on. It's just a great book. And that's going to ask you the questions. That asks us, and this is what we use in our company. Where are we playing? Like, what's our market? Who are we selling to? How big is that market? What's the geography? How many people are in it? So where are we playing first? And then what is our play inside that market? What is going to give us a frictionless growth? So, and then we kind of look at that and say, okay, how big do we think that play could get us? So if our strategy is we want to be the best at, pick an example. We work with a cloud company, but they put companies in the cloud. Okay, let's look at the competitor landscape then. Who's buying this? How many clients are out there? Who's playing in the space right now? We do a market analysis. Let's differentiate against those people. Where are we picking to slot in? And once we get operationally strong, is this product or service going to fly off the shelves? And you got to answer all those questions, because if not, you can run a great business and then hit a ceiling and say, how'd this happen? And well, it happened because your space was only so big and you didn't know it. And this person over here is actually offering this, and that differentiates them from you. And the people that have those differentiators generally are the ones that have the most frictionless growth in the market, generally.
So I think that makes a lot of sense. And I think this idea of, entrepreneurs really focusing on the differentiators and putting together a strategy to win makes a lot of sense. But let's just take a little bit of a step back. Why do you think entrepreneurs ignore this? Like how do you get to the point where, maybe when you started the business or the entrepreneur starts the business, they had a kind of a vision and a strategy, but then now you're running it and you're making some money and you're kind of operating it, and they might call you or reach out to you for a reason. But why do you think they're kind of ignoring this aspect of, how to win in the marketplace or putting together a strategy? Is it because they don't know how? They're complacent? Like what's in your experience, how do you see that happening?
First of all, Dave, you're good at this. We don't prepare these questions in advance, so that's a smart question.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's a smart question. I haven't answered that question because so we're a consulting company, but I'm an entrepreneur. I identify more with entrepreneurs than I do with consultants. So I'm going to answer it first of all as to why I ignored it for so long. And I think my answer for me looks like most of what I see out externally as well. So as entrepreneurs, depending on how you approach it. So it depends what kind of entrepreneur you are, first of all. If you're, we're an EO together, an entrepreneurs organization. I find EO people tend to be more what I call grinders or operators. They find a business, they like the business, they say, I'm going to do that business. So there's not a lot of strategy from the get-go, honestly. They just say, I like that, I'm going to do it. So that's one kind of entrepreneur, which I think is probably 90% of the entrepreneurs out there. So there was never even a thought in the beginning of a strategy. So then you meet people like the Elons or the Gateses or the Jobses. That's a different kind of entrepreneur, in my opinion, which is they're thinking about a problem in a market, they're thinking strategically, and then they're jumping into it from that standpoint. So most people that I meet as business people are kind of going at it from an operational standpoint just in the beginning. So then they operate their business, and it takes time. Entrepreneurs get sucked into so much stuff, and you can lose years off your business life if you're just trying to run a great business, because it's hard. So I believe the business itself, if you're not careful, will suck you in. It tells you, the business itself will tell you, take care of me, my operations, because I need it. And if you're not conscious of the fact that that can't be your only job, that's what you will naturally do as an entrepreneur, because your business always wants to suck your time away. So entrepreneurs don't do it, one, because I don't think the business tells them to do it. You have to have discipline to step outside of your business. So people that do this well are the ones that know that they need to be doing this. So they say, I'm going to step outside, I'm going to take time away from the business, and I'm going to take time to reflect on my vision. And there's all kinds of different ways to do that. There's the shower principle, I think has got some traction in the world right now. It's we have a system that has all this stuff in there, but it's basically, it's getting you thinking. You got to stop and pull outside your business and think on the business. And who does that? 95% of the entrepreneurs we work with won't do it unless we tell them to. They just don't. They're trying to run the business. So Elon, why is he so good? Well, he's a pretty smart guy, but he doesn't look at the business like that. He looks at operating the business like as a side note to him. He's like, I don't care. Operate it however you want. I'm going to spend my time thinking. So what does he get? Smart stuff, because he spends his time thinking. Jobs is the same way. Howard Schultz, Starbucks, same way. Disney, same thing. These are people who are all think first, operate second. And I think with entrepreneurs, they're generally operate first, think second. So they're out there operating their business. They're not taking time to step back because the business itself is sucking them in, because it wants your time and attention, and you need to make money. Most people are bootstrapped when they get started. And the second reason is, if you look at the marketplace and you go to Business Bookshelf, which is there are thousands of authors out there, you're going to find that 90% of those authors are about how to run a great business, because it's an easy topic. Good luck finding a book that says, how do I actually build an amazing business that's going to, actually be exponentially great? Because one, people who are doing that don't want to share that, really. Like Howard Schultz he can read his book. He's got a great book, but he's not going to tell you, he's not going to give you the secret sauce. So the books are in the market's telling you focus on running a great business. But if you look at the realities of companies, some of them aren't even great, but they're not even run that well. I would argue Apple's not run that well at all. They don't seem to want to help me when I go into the store, but they have a phenomenal product. And Walmart's not that well run, well operated, but it's got a very clear value prop. So, I don't think entrepreneurs take time to step back on their business and think about it.
So that strategy piece is really critical, right? So you help people kind of take that step back, help them work on the business. And you said something real earlier that really resonated with me, which is you really want to help them, or you mentioned a book, Playing to Win. So like that idea that you just don't want to play, you really want to play to win. And that feels different than like I'm just gonna do this as a lifestyle business, or I'm just gonna operate it well, or I'm just gonna keep this thing going to make money. I'm gonna like play to win. So when you have these conversations with entrepreneurs and you start to talk to them about like having a strategy to play to win, do they kind of light up and they say, yeah, that's what I want to do? Or do they say, yeah, there's no way I can't do that. I'm just, I got my hands full? Or how do you kind of get them past that point?
That's another great question.
2 for 2.
Another great question. So, okay. So let me back up on that one. That's a great question. Winning is very different for different people. Yeah, it's very different. And so what we try and figure out first is what's their definition of winning. And because that's what matters most. But interestingly, most people play small. And our thing is not, should you play small or play big? Our thing is, we want to make sure you're happy. As crazy as that sounds. Like, first of all, we want to make sure you're not dreaming so big that you don't know what that means, because there's risk that comes with that stuff. And we see it. We work with companies that are quite large, and we see what goes on in those companies. And we see what it takes to get to those sizes too. We work with companies that have started here and ended up here, and we've seen that journey. So playing to win is first of all, definitional to what you think it is. So we sit down and help them figure out, well, what does it mean to you in the first place? And that's not an easy thing. And we find out when we start working with an entrepreneur, it can take us a year or longer to even get that answer, because the first answer is always as big as possible. But most people have no idea what that actually means. So we really dive in. What is big to you? Are you trying to make $1 million a year? Are you trying to make 200 grand a year? Do you want to change the world? Do you not care about money? Do you care about an exit? What is big to you? So then we try and figure out what that means. And then we ask ourselves, is that what they think? Because that's what right? So, we have an article coming out, a blog coming out soon about you should talk to your friends about money, because nobody ever does. So it's one of the things I'm pretty passionate about, is I try and talk to people about money if I can, because what it's helped me do is I used to think, well, I'm really successful. And I talk to people and I realize, oh yeah, I'm not really. So I've learned to answer. I've given myself a bigger perspective by talking to people about their businesses and their profitability, on what success looks like. So what we try and do is say, what do you think winning looks like? And we try and broaden their view on winning by giving them some perspectives on what they could do. And then we kind of try and work with them to say, now really, what is your risk tolerance, and where do you really want to be? What kind of entrepreneur are you? Are you like a pushing hard entrepreneur? Are you kind of like a middle, or are you like an organic person? We try and figure out what your definition of winning is. And then we lean into figuring out what really has to get done to achieve that. And so that's why the strategy becomes important. So back to your question, if you're an organic person trying to grow 15%, 20% a year, which is still not easy, it's not easy to do that. If you're an organic person and you're trying to do that, I might say in that case, you could be strategy light, actually, as long as your market's big enough. You could be successful and you ignore this whole podcast and say, I don't need that crap. I can be happy and make X amount of dollars per year. You might be right. If you're planning to pick a, we're trying to push clients to be as successful as they can be to their abilities. Usually you got to start thinking out of the box to do that. So, it really depends on where you want to play, how you want to play. But the book Playing to Win, for your statement, it makes the assumption that you're going for it. But we don't make that assumption. We just want you to know you can go for it and to get you to think as big as possible. Because most of the time, including me, you don't even know what big is. So.
Yeah, that's powerful. So you have these conversations with the entrepreneurs, you're kind of helping them figure out what winning is to them. And then you're going through this strategy process, and in the book Playing to Win that you just mentioned, the core question there is, one of the core questions is, where do you play? And then when you're engaging with entrepreneurs on that question, how easy is it for them in general to kind of focus on where to play? Is that like, oh yeah, I kind of get it, I've been successful here, I want to keep playing there? Or is that a tough question for them, and their management teams to decide where to play? Is that the easier of the two questions, or the questions you're dealing with, or is that like pretty straightforward?
That's a good question. So every entrepreneur is different, for sure. Every entrepreneur is different. I don't have a broad answer on that one. I would say sometimes they know it and sometimes they don't. It's really that simple. So what we do is, we look at all kinds of different time frames. What's your North Star? Where you're really trying to get long term? What's what's really exciting to you? Like, is it an exit? Is it a change the world thing? Is it a dollar value? Is it employee satisfaction, or your own set? What's your measurement for your North Star? And then we start working backwards on that. But where we really like to focus is on this 3-year set of your vision for 3 years. You can call it Cameron Herold's Vision, or EOS 3-year picture. We use OKRs. So 3-year objectives. So to us, we want to look at the 3-year objectives. So if you say, I'm a $5 million business now, and I want to be a $12 million business in 3 years. Then we say, we're skeptics. So we say, show me how you're going to do that. Prove it. So we start to build it. We say, all right, what's it look like? Well, it looks like this is our team. This is this. We tend to look at buckets of revenue. So what buckets of revenue do we have? Where are those now? Where are they getting? And then what are the triggers? So for us, you got to have these triggers. So if you're really going to grow up by, in that case, let's call it 120%, 140%. What are the triggers in the next 3 years that you're going to put in place? They're going to do that. Are you going to add people? Are we going to add services? Are we going to do more organic? Are we going to increase the sales team? We have this whole growth resource tool we call it's like 22 things that you can do to grow your business. And we give them this tool and we say, which one of these are you doing, like to do that? And we're very skeptical always of these plans. So then we pull back, and somewhere along that is the answer to your question, which is, where are we playing? How big is the market? Is it actually big enough to support that 3-year set of objectives? Where are those customers now? And does our growth rate really support that? And what does our growth rate look like for the last few years? We tend to look at who are our competitors in that space. Are we the first pioneer, which always scares me? Are we a pioneer to be that size? Because if so, now we're really skeptical at that point. Productively skeptical, optimistic still, but skeptical. And, and then we kind of work backwards. So where you're playing becomes important in that, who you're selling to, what you're selling to them, and being honest about your market, and then, what your competitors are doing, and what's really going to get you to those numbers.
Yeah. So driving those conversations and helping them make decisions there is really critical. And then that other area of how to win, it feels like that's even harder, right? So getting them to make choices to how to win, because as I think about strategy, some of the examples that you shared, like it's always easy to look back and say, oh yeah, it's so obvious, that Elon Musk did this with SpaceX or with Tesla, or Steve Jobs did this. Oh yeah, all those strategy decisions were obvious in hindsight, but going into it, it's really hard. So how do you help the entrepreneurs think about like that how to win strategy so that they really believe it, and it really makes sense, so that they come up with something that actually works?
Yeah. So we believe in testing. So we're big testers. So we which the market will call pivots. We like the word pivot too. It's a little overused, but we basically think that there's the knowns and then there's the unknowns. And people like Elon, they specialize in the unknowns. They have this philosophy, and they go out and they raise all this money. I don't even know how that guy does it. Like I wouldn't even know how to even talk to him. Like he's a different plane in how he thinks. So he lives in the unknown. So in our companies, usually we're getting him under that $15 million threshold to start with them. And sometimes they're funded, sometimes they're not. I would say 70% of the time they are organic, they're self-funded, they're bootstrapped. The other 30%, they're PE owned or backed by something. It's a combination of where do we think are we taking the current bucket of what we're doing? We use buckets a lot. Like the buckets of revenue we have now, where are those in this 3-year objective? Or are we throwing them out completely? So if we're really doing a big pivot, are we throwing those out? Are we maximizing what we currently have? Or are we adding it? So what you'll say is we'll just say advertising. So currently we're doing $8 million in let's call it, managing ad spend. So all right, so we got $8 million here. Where are we in 3 years? We can grow that to 20 million. Okay, how are we going to do that? So now we're just maximizing a bucket. Then you might say, however, no, I have another idea. I'm going to try and do this. And then we say, okay, what's that look like? And then usually, if you're smart, you'll say, I have no idea. I just know it looks like this ultimately. Most people try and overdefine the pivot. It's a problem. So we say, okay, let's put that on the objectives list and say, we have this thing that changes the market through a SaaS platform. And that's all. That's it. It's all we say. And we have put a note on there that we started in Q1 of 2023. So then we start to figure out, okay, well, if that's really the play, and then we might put a number on there. Of this 10 million, this is $1 million in 3 years. All right, so now we've got some context. What do we need to be selling by? Let's call it 2 years out. We got something sold. We kind of work backward, reverse engineer it. And generally speaking, we'll make sure that the mothership is going to function during that time to finance it. And we make sure this test is happening in the background that we look at every 90 days. And we just try and go out there and play and fail a lot, usually, at the test until we eventually get something that sticks. Now, if you're a funded entrepreneur and you're just testing for a living, which is not generally our clients, that's a lot of biotech does that. They're tough clients, but they do that for a living. Different world, Elon's like that. Then that's all you do is test, iterate until something gets some traction on something. So for us, usually it's run the business, run a pivot on the side, make tests, analyze them every 90 days, see how they're working, and then eventually you can get it done. And then, often you'll iterate and change the idea. We call it test and iterate. So you'll iterate and change the idea, but you're still directionally heading in the same place. And, it's like a medical experiment, really. You're testing, did that work? Did that work? That didn't work. All right, now let's try this thing. And that happens all the time. I would say that of our companies, 20% of them right now, at least, have some kind of pivot going on, whether it's a new service, something that's revolutionary to the market, or just new to them, something else they're adding. 20% have something going on that's on the side that they're trying to grow to augment their business for some period in the future. Yeah. And usually it's currently.
Eric, I really like this approach because whenever I think about strategy, and I can feel guilty about my own business strategy in digital marketing, right? I always feel like, wow, I need to reinvent my company, throw out the old, go with the new. Thing I'm doing is not working as well as I want, so I need to go do something totally different. What you're talking about is a measured, structured, predictable, systematic approach to strategy that's going to help me get to the right place within the goals that I want, without blowing up the original business.
Yes. Yes. Because generally our clients need to do that. Now, you know, business is interesting because you look at all these business icons that you look at that you read a book about these icons and you see them on the news all the time. And I tell my clients, you're not them. Like you're not that you're not, you couldn't be them. You can. They are people that had a vision that went out and fully funded it with external dollars in most cases. And they are true dice throwers. And but that is not 99% of the entrepreneurs out there. It's good for books and it's good to watch on TV, but it's not how entrepreneurship actually works. So I tell people, you can do that if you want. I will support you, but you got to understand what you're getting into. Like, I don't know the numbers and I don't follow the stock at all, but I don't know how much money Tesla's ever made. I don't know if they've ever made money at all, actually. Maybe they have, I don't know. But these companies generally, like for somebody like you and I, unless you have a giant funding source or you go raise capital and you're taking money from that source, these companies don't make money. So you can IPO it and you kind of make mythical money that way. But ultimately, the capitalistic system means you need to make money at some point. We specialize in helping companies make money. So if you're going to actually make money, then you're going to have to not throw the baby out with the bathwater. That's generally how you do it. And it works. Now, it can take time. Elon can do something twice as fast because he has external dollars that's funding his salary, need to make profit. And that's not most entrepreneurs. It's a lot of biotech companies that run like that in Cambridge, but that's not the typical entrepreneur. So a typical entrepreneur has to be a little bit more, they got to be a little more finessey about it. And we try and help them do that.
Yeah. It sounds like you've got a good strategy for helping them do that. And we could talk about this all day, but I've got one more question for you. You talked about this concept earlier about creating an idea that'll help the product fly off the shelves. And I love that because it makes it tangible, like what we're trying to do with this strategy idea. So once you get to that place of thinking about, this pivoting into the right area and testing and trying these new things, eventually you want to get to this place where your product's flying off the shelves. So why do you use that as an analogy, and how does that actually feel when that's happening? How do you know? In other words, should I know that my strategy is working when it's flying off the shelves, or how do you use that concept in your consulting?
It's a great question. So first, I'll tell you where it came from. I did mention this to you. We did talk about this one topic before this podcast, and it came from a leadership team member who the service was strong. It was a SaaS company, high retention, super high retention, about $10 million business, tech firm. But we weren't adding new logos at a fast enough rate. Logo count was just not rising. Yet the market had already validated that what we're doing is well priced, and it was great. And the CFO he made this statement. He said, and he was truly curious. He said, I don't understand this. All of our clients stay with us. They survive all price increases. They're extremely happy. Yet, why is this not flying off the shelves? And I actually stopped and looked, and I looked down at the ground and I said, that's probably the smartest question I've ever had from somebody ever. And I didn't think of it that way. And the answer was, and then that completely changed the way we viewed that company. That company, by the way, sold for a tremendously large amount of money, a stupid multiple, because somebody else thought they had the answer to that question. Ultimately, we sold it relatively soon thereafter, and the multiple was literally nuts. And it's because they had the answer to that question. So back to your question of how do you know? The tough answer, which I believe in, is usually the right answer. The tough answer is you should know it. Like, you should know it. You should feel it, which is tough because most people never have that feeling. They never get it. It's the market should validate. You can grind and be very successful in business. But eventually, Jim Collins I believe it's Jim Collins. We don't teach this concept, but I've read it. Jim Collins talks about the flywheel, And, what's your flywheel? What are your three legs of your stool that's making your flywheel spin? And then when your flywheel starts to spin, you get exponential growth. And it's a great concept. I believe it's in Good to Great. I believe. I'm not sure about that, but I think it's in Good to Great. So it's this concept that if you have two or three things kicking in the business, your business will just launch. So that can be national exposure through some way, or you write a book that backs up your product, or you do sponsorships nationally, or you build a community and that takes off virally. But there's things that happen in a flywheel that once the flywheel clicks, you ramp. So in our consulting business, we've given this a lot of thought. So what are our flywheel? So we focus on national sponsorships because it gets us to be in national places. Because you get a flywheel effect. We have consultants that we put all over the United States and all over the world. Why? Because it gives us exposure nationally, and it increases the idea of the flywheel clicking. So you got to think about, what am I doing that's going to make this flywheel spin? And then ultimately it does start to spin at a faster rate. And how do you know it? You start getting a ton of inbound business. That's really the best way I can describe it. So if you're pushing and pushing against getting leads constantly, which is always the case, no matter who you are, but it's not in balance with the amount of inbound inquiries, inbound stuff, your flywheel's not started spinning yet. And you got to fix it. And you got to ask that yourself, those difficult questions. And the stuff I'm telling you about, I'm 52 years old. I didn't do any of this stuff until I was probably 40 something. And it wasn't that I was not successful, not doing these things. You could be very, very, very successful, not doing any of these things. But when I started to think about, okay, now we have to make these companies really successful, you're forced to ask yourself these different questions because there's no other option. So, people think, well, I'm going to go spend a bunch of money on advertising and then it's going to lead to X, and you know this better than anybody. The answer is maybe. Let's test it. Let's see if it works. If it works, then we can go national campaign. Now we got some good stuff and we're good to go. But we're constantly asking ourselves internally, is this going to take us from 100 clients to 150? Or what's this going to do? What is the recipe to making that happen? And usually you find it's only two or three things. And when those two or three things work, you launch. And if you can't figure out what those two or three things are, you're usually going to grind through amazing salespeople or whatever you're going to do to grind and grow by 15, 20% per year. And, still great businesses. And over time, that can work too. So it's funny, I joke and I ask a competitor, do we do competitive analysis on landscapes for competitors? And the people compare themselves to this company. I'll say, how old is that company? They'll say 75 years. I say, okay, pick somebody else now. Because they've been growing for 75 years at 15%. And now they're $50 million, $60 million. And now they're growing because they're just big. So at some point, organic becomes the flywheel because you're big enough. And that's just what happens. But if you're trying to jump that, then you need to think, you got to automate, you got to do something to trick that cycle.
Yeah. Wow, Eric, really powerful strategies and concepts here. And, as a digital agency, we see the fruits of that strategy with our clients all the time. So the clients, like you said, that have that strategic thinking down, when we're running campaigns, if we're running an ad campaign, we can measure, that strategy effectiveness by a lower cost per click, a lower cost per lead, a higher conversion from, MQL to SQL, a higher conversion to sale, lower cost of sales. All of that better strategic thinking you can measure in these campaigns. And when our clients have it, everything's easier. And when they don't have it, everything's hard. So your strategic thinking makes a massive difference in everything we're doing, in the advertising side, but everything.
I would imagine you are the flywheel for some of your businesses, because for us, we spend a lot of money on sales and marketing, and some of it's starting to click, it's starting to create this flywheel effect. But for you, yeah, I would say not that this is a Dave advertisement here, but for clients we have that are dialed in on the strategy, it's spend all of your money on advertising,
Mhm.
all of it, because it's already done. Like, just spend all of it, spend it, borrow it, whatever you need to do, get the word out, because it's already dialed in. So, that's how you do it. So, but on the flip side, if they don't have it dialed in and they say, well, I'm going to go spend $1 million on this, I say, yeah, why don't you just give it to us? We'll take it. You're going to have a better, higher ROI on that, because the market, you have nothing proven yet that you're going to be spending out there, and you might even get a bunch of leads, but I'm not sure what you're going to do with them.
Yeah, if you don't have that strategy baked, no amount of advertising or SEO or cool website will make that happen. If you have that, then like you said, it becomes a money machine.
That's another myth. Another person can talk to you about. You probably already done that one, but that's another myth. That I find that with entrepreneurs all the time. They'll hire a marketing company, and this quite well, and they'll give them X amount of dollars, and they'll say, this is going to solve my problem. I say, it's going to definitely tell you what problems you have. I can tell you that much.
Right.
They take their $150,000 from you, and they're wonderful people. And the clients will say to me, well, they were a great company. I said, yes, they are. We've learned some things here. They're a great marketing company. They're not magicians. So you gotta work on your business and make sure that what you're selling is going to be something that's going to fly off the shelves.
Yeah.
The best place to start is my biggest change, and I know we're running on time, but the biggest thing I've done to change myself is just to realize I had to do it. For some reason in my mind, I was an EOS implementer for a lot of years. And I learned a lot from that system, honestly. And it was a great system. And I'm thankful for the time I was there. And it was awesome, and there's people using EOS in the crowd, it's a great system. So what I started to realize, though, was it's attacking that level of the business. And I started to realize, okay, this is really valuable for what this does. And it would shore it up. And this is probably a good way for us to end, because it's, like I said, 60% of it, in my opinion, is you got to run a great business. You have got to run a great business. The myth, though, is that that's enough. And it's just not. We have that as two parts of our system as well. We think that stuff is amazing. That operation stuff is necessary, but it's not going to buy you your jet. It maybe not in your lifetime. It might in your kid's lifetime if you keep it going. So, yeah,
interesting. Well, one thing that's coming through loud and clear from our conversation is great strategy and great marketing have to go together. You got to do both of those well for it to work.
That's correct.
Eric, this has been a great conversation. You're a very smart guy. You've helped hundreds of companies. You're making a big difference in the world. So I thank you for taking the time. So appreciate
it. Great to talk to you, as always.
If someone wants to get in contact with you to learn more, how would they do that?
Well, they can probably email me directly at eric@cruiseandco.com, or you can do info@cruiseandco.com, or you can go to our website, cruiseandco.com, or you can, I don't know, Google me on the interweb, whatever you want.
Perfect.
Come to my house, whatever works.
All right. Thanks again, Eric. Appreciate you taking the time.
Thank you, Dave.
Take care.